Live, and I'm pleased to have as our guest Curtis Franks, the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of FIFA World Cup 2026. Welcome, Curtis.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always good not just to have a lawyer with a really interesting job, but a very active SLA member. So, a second level of welcoming to the program. We always like to start out in the same way, which is we've we've gone ahead and told everyone what your title is, but why don't you take a minute to explain what your job is if we have enough time in a half hour to lay that out? I don't know. And then also talk a little bit about your particular path to getting to where you are today.
Okay. All right. So my current job as the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary here is basically handle all things legal. So that is anything to do with anything that has a legal aspect of it. So I have a team here in the US, but also have a team in Mexico and Canada because the 26th World Cup is across all of North America. And it's about right now 17 attorneys that ultimately report in through me, and we handle everything legal. So that's everything from compliance to contracts to just anything with the legal aspects of it. So it's a big encompassing job. It's about everything operational, everything internal from HR issues. Just anything legal is what kind of comes across my desk and what I manage and handle. Really have a great team here that helps me out on a day-to-day basis. I have three country directors, one each in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. They kind of handle the day-to-day operational things and allow me to kind of focus in on kind of strategic things with the executive team here. So that's very helpful. And that's just pretty much it. It is I call it big job security because you got a lot of different things going on across all 50 states and the two provinces that we deal with in Canada, and then the three states in Mexico as well. So it's just a big encompassing job that we just manage and handle and provide legal counsel across how to put on the World Cup. How I got here has been kind of a long, winding road. I guess I'll start when I came out of. I've been all over the sports landscape. I went to Tulane University for law school and came out of there, did not want to go to a law firm. And so I took an internship with the Atlanta Hawks when I first came out. It was only supposed to be for 3 months while they kind of changed ownership groups and to help them out from an HR perspective. So I started off in HR and as an intern there. And while I was there, Scott Wilkinson, who's still there, the general counsel of the Hawks, gave me the opportunity while I was there to just kind of get some low level work to do sponsorship agreements and things like that. And did that for a little while. And then they ended up offering me a full time position with them where I was splitting my time across multiple departments between business development, community development on the project they were working in, and then just helping out with legal work that I could do. And I absolutely love that job. That was like the perfect job coming out. This is my thing. I was loving it. Did that for about 2 years, and then the Great Recession hit, and I was the last one in and the first one out the door. And laid off. So I got
Common story there.
exactly got laid off from that position. But had a couple of jobs in the interim, one with the local paper in Atlanta, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, just reviewing contracts and doing things for them. Did that for about a year. And then went, and then they were, and then the Great Recession is about to hit them too because nobody was buying newspapers in the same manner they were doing. They were really transitioning over from actual paper things, moved to more online. And so they were getting rid of a lot of people. And I didn't want to stay around and wait for another layoff because I'd just been through that. So I got another job with Emory University in their School of Medicine. And I was their their associate director of contracts. And I was just basically doing contracts for everything that was related to the School of Medicine at Emory. Wasn't really my passion point of what I wanted to do. It was only there for about 9 months. Then the position opened up at Coca-Cola, where they were in their business affairs group handling sports and entertainment transactions. Got that job, and that kind of like really kickstarted my career. So I was with Coca-Cola doing jobs there for about 4 years. After I left Coke, went to NBC Sports and was there for about 4.5 years, handling things and supporting the Golf Channel and did everything related to golf for NBC Sports. Left NBC and then went to the NCAA where I was the associate general counsel there and handled all of their kind of revenue generating aspects of what they did. So that's everything from their all 90 of their championships to their media partnerships and sponsorships and manage their IP portfolio. And then got the opportunity to go back to Coke after the NCAA to lead their full group that handled all their sports and entertainment across the world. So I was the head of that group, and I went back to Coke the second time and was there for about a year and a half and was out across the table negotiating with FIFA. And then the opportunity came here for FIFA to be the general counsel for the World Cup. So they asked me if I would come over, to, come to the other side of the table and be here. And so that's how I ended up being here. So long winding road, avoided the law firm, which was great for me. So I was good, but it's been all kind of all over in different aspects and different jobs from, everything from domestic to international with Coke in here at FIFA. So it's been good.
I think what you've just laid out is sort of a topic we've had a lot of fun with on this program, which is nobody's path is the same. You
Nah.
can't really set out what a path is, but you got to keep the blinders off, and opportunities will pop up. And if your goal is always, for those listening wanting to be a sports lawyer or in the sports business, being a sports lawyer has a billion touch points.
Yeah.
Because what is a sports lawyer? It's everything, because it touches on every legal discipline. And I think you've laid out an interesting path, from teams to big product players in the sports universe to broadcasters, now to a international organization, but
Yeah.
always moving forward and staying, keeping true to your interests to stay in sports. So that's sort of a great story.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've talked about is how your job has so many different different elements and so many different responsibilities. One of the phrases that you threw out was responsibility for compliance. And compliance is a sort of legal term of art, kind of, that gets thrown around a lot. But can you tell us a little bit about how you relate to what the compliance issues are with respect to the upcoming World Cups? World Cups.
Yeah, so that's good to put it that way. It encompasses a lot of things. It's your normal kind of compliance issues here with conflicts of interest and things like that. But particularly for the World Cup, we have a lot of big kind of just regulatory compliance issues with the U.S. governments and the various governments in Mexico and Canada as well. One of the biggest things is that some of our people, our member associations for FIFA, are on the U.S. naughty list, where you just basically can't interact with them in any way, shape, or form. And one of those teams that has already qualified for the 26th World Cup is Iran, and so they have already qualified. Well, if you're following U.S. law, you can't give any benefit whatsoever to Iran, not even a cup of water or anything else like that that's out there to them, let alone provide them with flights back and forth and hotel accommodations and all the things that normally come with that, including prize money that normally comes along with people with countries participating in the World Cup. And so one of the things we had to do is basically get an OFAC license that gives us an exemption to provide those types of things to restricted countries, such as who have to qualify, like Iran, North Korea, Syria, just name the naughty list, and doing that there. So that's a big, huge thing that we're dealing with. So it was one, making sure that we had the appropriate licenses so that we could provide the normal services for executing the tournament our end to those member associations there, but also just making sure that anybody associated with us that we'd be dealing with would do that as well, and making sure our license extends to them as well. So that includes hotels. So if I want to have someone in Iran stay at a U.S. hotel, I need to ensure that my OFAC license that I have extends to that Marriott or that Hilton, so that they don't basically run afoul of providing the benefit, it'll follow that as well. Flights, food, accommodations, anything that's associated with kind of just basically the normal terminal operations, we have to kind of worry about from a compliance standpoint. So that's one thing. The other thing that my compliance team deals with a lot is just kind of like just making sure that the appropriate visas are handled. So FIFA is a European-based organization that has members and also employees from all around the world. Well, making sure that those people are able to get into the U.S. in the right way with the right visas, so that we don't mess up their work authorization, so we don't end up inadvertently getting them deported or barred from the U.S. is a big thing that we kind of make sure that we handle that from a compliance standpoint as well. So that's something that we're working at feverishly now, because we have the Club World Cup coming up in 25 this year, and so we got to get a lot of people in from out of the country in here who need to provide work and be able to enter the U.S. Appropriately. But that requires making sure that they're compliant with the law and making sure that they are obtaining the right entry documents and visas to enter the United States. Particularly now, given kind of the crackdown that's kind of happening from an immigration standpoint, we're very keen to ensure that every single person that we're dealing with in the tournament is basically here in the appropriate way, in the appropriate fashion, so that we don't run afoul of that. So like the compliance division is even way more bigger here at an importance level and making sure we're doing things right than it was when I kind of started 2 years ago. So, um,
W-
just
Well,
interesting.
that raises a really interesting question, which is, as we've seen in the last 3 or so months, there's lots of changes going on,
Yeah,
particularly with immigration and who's in favor and who's not in favor. Do you have any kind of, has the government been able to give you any assurances that these visas will remain valid? Or is there a contingency plan? I mean, what happens if Iran qualifies and then suddenly they say, no Iranian can come to the U.S.? What's the contingency plan? Play the tournament with one less team, bring in another team. How does that work? I mean, this is an event that's years and years in the planning stages, and yet now we're in a situation where there's really seems to be a big question, particularly in this country, about who can get in and then who can get out.
yeah.
How are you guys addressing that?
Well, thankfully, we have a good relationship thus far with the Trump administration. In fact, they announced that a whole White House task force is being led by the president's chair and the vice president's co-chair, and so they really consolidated a lot of the governmental functions that we need across Homeland Security, the State Department, and everything else running through the White House. So that's helped. And we do have assurances thus far that essentially we will be able to, from a just a tournament standpoint, be able those teams should be able to get in with the appropriate visas. So we work very closely with the State Department just to make sure that we're applying for the right visas, that they're aware of who's going to be coming in, and we're managing that. Now, having said that, who knows what the geopolitical, outlook will look like in a month, or or even a year from now, when we actually need to, execute and do this. But right now, we have assurances from everybody at the State Department and with Homeland Security that they're going to, that they're cooperating with us, that we're aware with them, and so we're working lockstep with them to ensure that that is something that we keep there. So that's all I can really tell you, is that we're working with them. They know what we're doing. They know our plans, and so we're just making sure that they give us 5 steps. We're following those 5 steps, and that's kind of how we're handling it and managing it. And that's the only thing that we can do. If
Right.
all of a sudden something happens where they say no, we can't do this, well, then we'll have to adjust and figure out what that means for the tournament moving forward, and how we deal with that. But again, I can't really opine on that now because I'm just not sure. We're keeping our heads, focused and straight to kind of say, like, we're going to do that. But for me, thankfully, we have enough coordination with the State Department and with Homeland Security at this point to do that. In fact, the Attorney General was just here in our offices last week, so that's going to give you an idea like how close we are to to keeping that team involved in what we need from an immigration standpoint. So it's key in the top of my list to just make sure nothing happens, because I don't want anything to happen on my watch where someone is barred or deported, or
Sure.
something else from negative happening from an immigration standpoint. So
So on top of all of that, let's not lose sight of the fact that this is not a U.S. based event. As
no,
you've
it's not.
said, there's Canadian matches, there's Mexican matches in different states and different provinces. It seems to me daunting enough to put on these kind of events in one country, but you're involved with three separate countries. Where's the coordination? And I think you mentioned you have sort of leads in each of the two countries, but how does that coordination work? Because between these two other countries, we've got issues. And how are you managing that and those cross border issues? I mean, if a team flies into the U.S. for their first match, but then their second match is in Canada, and they
Yeah,
play their third match in the U.S. and their fourth match in Mexico, how does that Rubik's cube of immigration work?
yeah. Good question. Right. I mean, right now, I think it's in everyone's best interest across three countries to ensure that there's smooth operational aspects to the tournament, and that nothing happens. So we've had assurances from all three governments that they will work in coordination with each other as necessary and needed to move people and goods and services and things that we need, across the things that would be, tournament related. So for me, the coordination, I think it happens in a lot of different levels. For me, just with my team, we meet on a biweekly basis and a weekly basis as needed, depending on what the issue is, to ensure that we are understanding what the legal issues are and that we can kind of coordinate and get people in the right place. We work heavily with our government relations and the government affairs teams in both, Zurich and here in the U.S. to ensure that we understand what is going on from that standpoint. So for me, it is just like collaboration and communication. Like we over communicate, flooding each other's inboxes and doing what we need to do. It's just necessary and needs to happen, just because we need to understand what's going on and making sure we're all on the same page. So that communication is something that I preach with my team, and we continue to do that with all of our RFAs. I think with the Club World Cup coming up, we'll see a lot of things that we can kind of work out a lot of kinks about things that happened, it worked, it didn't happen, that we can adjust and make adjustments as for 2026, given the tournament that we're having here in 25. But to answer your question, Bobby, like it's just a lot. Like for me, I tell my team all the time, we can plan for what we know, but there's going to be all kinds of unknowns, and we just kind of have to make sure that the known doesn't knock us off our heels. So it's a lot of coordination, it's a lot of communication, it's a lot of just making sure that everybody across three countries knows what's going on, both internally and at state and local governments as well, and just a lot of coordination and a lot of relationship building. So, it's a lot of relationship building on our end to just make sure we know who the appropriate contacts are, who can really make decisions and who can't. So you got to kind of flesh that out. And a lot of times too, a lot of people will kind of talk and say that they can make decisions, but you kind of really feel that they're not the real person you need to talk to you in doing that. So we've done a lot of that over the past years about kind of like a lot of relationship building with the cities and with the state governments, local governments on the ground, just to make sure we understand who need to talk to what, just in case, to make it as smooth as possible.
And will the
And
Club
then
World Cup be in all three countries as
the
well?
Club World Cup will just be in the U.S., but
Oh,
I mean,
easy, easy.
yeah, easy, but yeah, with still got 11 venues across the U.S. and everything else. So it'll be a little bit of a test run. But I mean, we'll run into the same issues from an immigration standpoint, getting people out in and out of countries, things like that. I think that'll be a good test point for us to figure out what we're doing and figure out what worked and what didn't, and then make adjustments as needed. Then also kind of give a postmortem back to the three governments to say, hey, here's where we need your help. We thought this would work, but this didn't. Here's what we need adjustments and help with in our process and our procedures and our protocols to help ease this so it makes it smooth as possible. So that's cool.
So, you know, the players uh, like to play on grass.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that there's a lot of stadiums that use turf. And admittedly, the turf product modernly is better than the AstroTurf that destroyed large swaths of skin on my body back in the day. But in dealing with that issue and venues, is there a FIFA mandate that the games have to be played on grass?
Yes, every game, every match for both the Club World Cup and the World Cup will be on grass. So no, we won't be dealing with artificial turf. So
Thank
and,
heavens.
yes, so yeah, no worries on that one. Every match will be on grass.
And
So,
so and we've talked about the contracts, and when people stop to think, they look at a game on television and they go, oh, there must have been a contract for the rights to do that. And they don't think about the other 47 rights agreements that you need to make in order to get that image on the screen. So one of my questions for you is, when you're going to a venue, for example, are you doing, each venue has its own separate agreement, each of them has the requirements about camera positions, availability, power, et cetera, et cetera?
yeah, I think so. I mean, we have basically tournament standards that we have across all of the venues, and so yes, each of those agreements are separate agreements with the venues, but each of those agreements have our standard requirements from pitch size to essentially what we need from a pitching standpoint and what we need to have the actual to fit the pitch in and the space around the pitch, to power, to overlay, to broadcast positions, to everything, to concessions, the number of concessions outlets you must have within the stadiums and things like that. So those are just kind of the basic requirements that we have. And for particularly for a World Cup, you know, those requirements were put out during the bidding process, and each stadium that bid for it ensured and to make, you know, made agreements when they kind of signed up to their bidding process that they can kind of meet those basic requirements. So essentially, every single stadium will have that basic base level of what we need from a World Cup compliance standpoint. We'll have that, and stadiums are right now making, if they didn't have that already, they're making adjustments as needed to their stadiums from a construction standpoint and adjustments there, whether it be, you know, permanent or temporary kind of seating or concessions, things like that, to ensure that, you know, you have a seamless, you know, basic standard across all 16 host cities. So
And production is done through a world feed, I assume?
yeah, yep. So yeah, normally, so yeah, for the Club World Cup, yes, it'd be done from a world feed, and then you then basically is licensed out depending on what the country is. So
Yeah, as for
yeah,
those uninitiated in the media space,
yeah,
events like the Olympics will have one compound
yeah,
where they will produce a feed for the world, and then each of the rights holders in each of the markets can have their analysts and uh, of various ilks,
yeah,
play-by-play, color commentators, will call the game off of a world feed. So it's not like every country has to bring in their own camera crews.
yeah. No, you just, I mean, just logistically, you couldn't do it. You know, especially like a
No.
world, just yeah, you just couldn't do it. So
So the,
yeah,
the the lesson here is when you're watching the game in America on whatever channel, the image you're getting is not. Don't complain to Fox or NBC or whoever. It's being controlled by another feed. The broadcaster in your home country just is getting the image that it's getting.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah,
be aware
yeah,
of that.
yeah. You know how it
Um,
works.
yeah, I know how it works, but I think a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand that, everything that goes into a broadcast. You're sitting in there and saying, people are thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's so much work to put on this and get these agreements set up with the venues and where we're going to do the production." But they don't realize how deep the contracts go and how
Yeah,
many layers that you have to put up with from have we licensed that font to use in the graphics?
that
It's layers and layers and layers of stuff. And music, how are we going to do
music
music? What
exactly.
music are we going to do? What can
Yeah,
we have? There are so many issues for an event like this, any event really, a sporting event. But in your case, because of the distribution and all the different markets, it's so many. The onion has way too many layers to peel.
it does. It does. I like, again, when I said job security, I meant it. Like the all the things you have to think about. I tell people all the time, good luck getting rid of me. Like, good luck doing this by yourself, because it's like it's a lot that you have to kind of think through and just make sure that everything is right. Because the minute and for me, it's not the big obvious thing that are kind of like causing most trouble. It's that one small thing that you didn't really kind of see or kind of ratchet up that can kind of put a, you know, a big hole in the ship and you have the whole thing leaking. So you know, it's a lot to kind of make sure you're thinking through. So
Yeah, and look, part of the job of any of these kind of events is protecting the brand, the marks of FIFA, for example. But it goes deeper because you have, I would assume, relationships with advertisers, et cetera, giving them sort of higher level of rights, official
yeah.
sponsor rights, et cetera, et cetera. And then protecting not just FIFA marks, but all of those other marks. Is that your responsibility, or are you reaching out to an official sponsor and saying we've discovered something, or is enforcement on FIFA's shoulders?
No, brand protection definitely falls within my group, and so we have a whole team of brand protection, you know, attorneys and enforcement people that will be managing that. And yes, it's our responsibility to handle the execution of the brand protection program, which is protecting one, our brand, you know, the FIFA brand, everything from, you know, use of the marks to, illegal feeds, you know, to all kinds of things that happen there, but also from a brand protection standpoint and protecting the commercial affiliates is what we call them here, which is basically the sponsors of the tournament. So that is our, you know, the Adidas's and the Cokes and Bank of America's and everybody else, and ensuring that one, they're, you know, that those rights are delivered to them, but also their brands and our rights are protected there. So that's everything from ambush marketing. So ensuring that Nike doesn't have something set up, you know, right next door to the stadium to ensure that happens from an ambush standpoint. Same thing with Pepsi, with Coke, you know, or something else like that. Um, But then also just from a brand protection standpoint to make sure you don't see little kind of ambushing things that happen. So, people walking in with T-shirts that kind of have some things that are going to be in camera shots. Um, that random vendor that just kind of sets up and all of a sudden wants to kind of just sell things outside of the stadium and just that getting rid of those things. Then also just counterfeit tickets is another big thing too. We're moving to all digital, so we can have a little bit less of it, but still just making sure that people understand that you need to have a digital ticket. If somebody's selling you a paper ticket, probably going to be, we have some commemorative things that we're probably sign off from a paper standpoint, but just understanding that all of our tickets are digital. So handling that from a counterfeit ticket sales point is another big thing. So a lot of it is just kind of like protection, but a lot of it's kind of education out to one, the sponsors. I worked at Coke, so I know every single Super Bowl we got the letter from the NFL and from Pepsi about the use of the things like that.
Oh,
So
those letters I know all about. Yeah.
yeah, so you get that and just kind of educating your competitors that are out there, but also just educating the public to protect themselves and just understand, particularly from a ticketing standpoint. Like when you get off the plane, if somebody's selling you tickets, that's probably not legitimate. If you're, that jersey, just here are the things you need to look for if you have that jersey that's out there to make sure it's actually a real jersey. You're not getting kind of a counterfeit jersey because that's the other big thing that happens a lot. Counterfeit jerseys just everywhere. So you
Well,
know
you get 2 blocks from any stadium, any arena nowadays. There's somebody out there selling you an official fill in the name of the team item,
exactly.
which is not an officially licensed product.
Yeah, not at all. So just making sure that those things like there that we have the robust program to protect that because I mean I've been on the sponsor side. Those sponsors pay a lot of money, have a lot of
Oh yeah.
expectations. What you sold them and them having kind of this clean environment where they could be the only person that's there and that exclusivity is something that's big and important and they expect to have that protected. And so for me, having lived on the other side of the world, I kind of understand those expectations that are out there to do that. And so now I've been leading the team here on the FIFA side that handles the execution of that. So it's big.
Will you have boots on the ground enforcement people at all the venues looking out for that kind of
Yeah.
bootleg operation?
Yeah, so we're about to have teams that will be both inside and outside the stadium that will kind of manage and handle that, and work with, and it really is kind of a function of local law enforcement working with them as well to kind of help and assist with, if they have clean zone ordinances, helping them because they need to enforce those ordinances, helping with that, and just making sure that we have the security people in the stadium and also local law enforcement to help us enforce that as well. I don't want to put my people in harm's way. They shouldn't be going out being cavalier trying to save somebody from doing it, but they just need to kind of have eyes on the ground, and then have protocols in place to who we know to go talk to kind of get the appropriate people who have the ability to shut it down and for them to go and shut it down as well. But yeah, we'll have teams in all the stadiums that will manage that.
So I think we've been talking for a little while now, and it sounds like there's nothing going on with preparing for a World Cup, that there's just not many contracts that have to be involved, many tentacles. I mean, we're pulling this the thread on the sweater, and it just keeps unraveling and unraveling and unraveling. But that's kind of the interesting game of being involved in these kind of events. That it's really interesting, it's really exciting. Do you, when you're become an official sponsor of FIFA World Cup, Coca-Cola is one of those, I assume.
Yep. Hmm.
Is Do you need then to, when you're doing the media deals, provide those lists of official sponsors and what their protections are to all the media partners so that they're not going out undermining those official sponsorships?
Yeah, yeah, you definitely do that. I mean, being at the NCAA, and and I'll give an example here. In the NCAA was the same example of Coke being a sponsor, but our partner at CBS and Turner had one year where there was an exorbitant amount of Mountain Dew commercials being run and kind of things that are associated with that it's problematic. That causes relationship issues if I'm paying for this and I'm doing this, but on your media feed it looks like a different partner is actual the sponsor of that. I don't think you're going to see that as much here at the World Cup because that our our feeds our feeds are limited to commercial things are limited to our sponsors, so you're only going to see that there. But yeah, our media partners need to understand who our commercial affiliates are, so that they can help and assist and protect those rights, and so that they don't have any types of programming that will be there. So you just can't have shoulder programming with sponsors that are out, inconsistent with those sponsors as well. So that pregame show should not be managed by this, and your postgame show shouldn't be sponsored by, or presented by somebody else that's not a partner as well.
Right.
So it's not just kind of like the actual feed and what we have, it's everything that's ancillary to it, from shoulder programming to your promotional details and what you're doing and how you're sponsoring it and what you're doing from that standpoint too. So we definitely kind of inform everybody around it about who's our sponsors and what we can do, and then we kind of limit the association staff to those sponsors who are actually our sponsors that's paid to be kind of for that exclusivity with us.
Yeah. Look, I remember going through commercial formats and having to say things like, this is Pepsi's the official sponsor. You can't follow Pepsi commercial with a Coca-Cola commercial.
Right. Exactly.
You
Yeah.
got to put
Exactly.
it another block. You just,
Yeah. Yeah, man.
we
Yeah.
got to, who's protected? These people are paying X millions of dollars to be the official. You can't counter program in a commercial block.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's, look, I assume that you're going to have people watching that as well. It's so interesting to hear how many levels of checks that you have to have in an event like this. And I think most of the public doesn't realize how difficult it is to enforce and protect everybody's rights, because you're constantly going, okay, is there a mix up here? And people are saying, why are you looking at the commercials? Well, because people have paid money to protect that right. And yes, Coca-Cola can use the FIFA logo. They've paid for the right to joint marks, but you can't let Pepsi do that, for example. And so your enforcement team, I mean, I know what it's like, but they're going to be sitting on the edges of their chairs, you know, ready to hit a stop button or call the broadcaster and go, excuse me, but
Yeah.
a little more aggressively, perhaps.
Definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, that's the busiest. I mean, for me, like a lot of, I told them from a tournament standpoint, given my experience in NCAA, I was like, a lot of the pure legal people with the transactional things, your stuff goes right up to the tournament, and then you kind of have a little bit of a lull. But the brand protection people, like, you're going to be doing that, then all of a sudden your hard work comes up from that standpoint, because you got to basically, from the time the tournament starts to the time it ends, you're in protection mode from start to finish. So it's a big, it's a big task for us. I was everybody prepared. Get some sleep now, because you won't
Yeah, I don't
have
know.
any more
It's
6 weeks.
Look, I can speak from experience. Doing Super Bowls is a daunting experience.
Yeah.
Just everything leading up to it, sitting there in a room reviewing every single commercial before the game, making sure that, nobody's up, everything's cool. You're doing it for a bunch of games over a
Yeah.
over 3 weeks. It's like you're right. Curtis, you and your team better get some sleep,
Yeah, man. I
because
tell you too.
2025 will be back. Come 2026, there better be a lot of Red Bull or whoever the appropriate sponsor is available for your team.
Yeah, man. Yes, lots of Coke caffeinated products. We put it that way. Do it that way.
Well, look, hey, it was great having you. I really appreciate your taking the time to speak with us about this. It's really interesting, and I love having the ability to explain to people how events work and all of the legal work that's involved. And for young lawyers out there and for law students, when you're thinking about becoming a sports lawyer, we've had a little 30-minute discussion here and have given you about 15 or 20 legal disciplines that make you a sports lawyer.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
lots of opportunities. I'm pretty sure this episode will be put out just before our annual conference. And we hope to all see you there in Nashville. It's going to be a great conference celebrating our 50 years of the SLA. And I'll see you there. I hope. Hope you're going to be there.
Yeah.
And thank you
Yeah.
again. For those of you that aren't members of the Sports Lawyers Association, what are you waiting for? Go to sportslaw.org and become a member. That gives you lots of stuff behind our paywall and invitations to various webinars and events that we put out. So, Curtis, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll
Yeah.
catch up soon.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
Great.